In this video, I'm going to show you how to decorate this adorable under the sea cake. Hi, it's Karolyn. If you want to learn how to bake and decorate amazing cakes, then I would love for you to join me by hitting subscribe and the bell. If you want to skip the intro and get right into the video, there are chapters linked below. So I'm going to show you how to decorate this under the sea cake, and I'm starting with my cake already baked, filled, iced, and it is in the refrigerator waiting to be decorated. I have videos showing you how I bake, fill, ice, refrigerate cakes, make the icing, make the fondant, use the edible images. All of that is going to be linked in the description, and any tools that I use or other videos that I reference will be linked below as well. And I will also let you know how much I charged for this cake. So let's get started. I have some royal blue icing here and some more royal blue icing coloring, and I'm putting a couple drops in here and not mixing it the entire way. I don't want to blend it. I want some color variation in here. And you can see what that looks like. I got my cake out of the fridge. The icing is solid. I'm not going to mess it up. So now I am wiping a very thin layer of this buttercream around the side of the cake just to get that cool little water effect on there. So it's a really thin layer. I'm covering the entire side of the cake. You could do the top as well. I just didn't feel like doing the top, but I'm letting that icing go over the top of the cake. I have a bench scraper here. I ran it under hot water, wiped it off with a paper towel, and I'm just scraping the excess off. I'm holding that perfectly vertical, so I have vertical sides, and then I'm just taking my spatula and scraping the excess icing. Remember, that cake is cold, so I'm not going to mess that up. That looks good. Let's put that back in the fridge. Now I printed out these edible images. I'm going to link these images in the description for you, and I'm just cutting each of them off of that big sheet, and then I want to cut an even white border around all of these pieces. I just think that it looks so much better when you have a little white border around all of them. Now I do leave some white border. I don't cut exactly on like in the little tiny areas like the bottom of that tail. I just think it looks so much better that way. So let's flip them all upside down on a paper towel. I got some piping gel and I'm wiping piping gel along the entire back of the piece, making sure I go past the edge onto the paper towel. That way I get all of the edges. And then when I put it down, I'm curling it down so no air bubbles form behind it. And I rolled out this white fondant really thin, and in that fondant, and all the fondant that I'm going to use is this Gum-Tex powder. It helps your fondant set a little harder and makes it so much easier to work with. That'll be linked in the description. I have a wet paper towel and an X-Acto knife, and I'm using that white border as a guide, and I'm cutting out all of these pieces. And anytime I cut anything out of fondant, I'm going to take my time to smooth my cuts because the cuts are usually a little jagged. So I'm going to set that on a cutting board and do that for all of the rest of the pieces, making sure I smooth my cuts after I cut them out. And that looks good. Let's set those aside. I have a piece of non-slip pad underneath my cutting board so it doesn't slide around, an X-Acto knife, a wet paper towel, a Dresden tool, and a little bit of water, and we're going to make the number. So I rolled out this fondant really thin. Again, it has that Gum-Tex powder mixed into it, so it sets a little harder. And I printed this out the size I want it to be. So I measured my cake and I printed that out. And I'm just going to do my trace, cut, and smooth method on here. So I'm tracing this number onto the fondant and making sure that line transfers onto the fondant. And then I'm just going to use my X-Acto knife to cut this out. And I have my favorite numbers PDF, and I'm going to link that in the description for you. It has all of my favorite numbers that I use for my number toppers. And then anytime I cut anything out of fondant, like I said, I'm going to take my time and smooth my cuts. I have thicker white fondant. It's probably about a ½ inch thick, and I'm putting that on top, and I'm going to lift it up, paint a little bit of water underneath, and then put that back down so it goes on there in the correct position. Don't use too much water. You don't want it seeping out underneath. And then anytime I cut anything out of thicker fondant, I'm going to use the tip of the blade to make a guideline. And then once I have that done, I'm going to put the blade all the way down to the cutting board and cut this out. I find that when you make a guideline, you won't mess up the fondant piece. It's just so much easier that way. I'm going to flip it over, take my fingers and smooth the edges from the back, and then do the same thing from the front. And then I want to get a skewer in here, and you want to twist it in, don't jab it in. And if I put it in the center, you're going to be able to see it. So I have to see where I can stick it in there so you won't be able to see it. I'm sticking it right in the center. That's why I roll that white piece out a little thicker, and I'm screwing that in, flipping it over, making sure that you can't see it. And I'm going to put that on the cutting board and set that aside to dry. Now I measured my cake again and I printed this out the size that I want it to be. I rolled that red fondant out really thin, and again I'm doing my trace, cut, and smooth method. So I'm tracing all of these letters onto the fondant, making sure that that line transfers, and then I'm using my X-Acto knife and I'm going to cut out all of the letters and smooth my cuts. And after I do that, I'm going to realign the letters on top of that picture so they dry into the correct shape. Anytime you cut any letters out, you want to make sure you cut the center pieces out first before you cut them out. It's just so much easier when you're working with these little pieces to cut the center pieces out first. And that looks good. Let's set that aside. Now I'm making the shells. I have these meltables. I'll link them in the description. I have some brown and a lot of white. And I'm going to put these in the microwave for about a minute to melt them. And once they're melted, I just like to stir them a little bit. And I only use like 3 little discs of the brown. You don't want too much brown. And then I'm going to mix that in there, kind of like I did with the blue and the icing earlier. I'm not mixing it the whole way. I want to have a little marbling effect. Now, I got these shell molds years ago. I can try to find similar ones. I don't think they make these same ones anymore, but any seashell mold will do. And you want to fill it up and then tap it so you can get rid of all the air bubbles on there. So the ones that have these multiple openings, I just pour a bunch of chocolate on top and push it into the cavities, and then I take a knife and I just wipe off the excess and tap it again on the countertop to remove all the air bubbles. And I'm going to put them in the fridge for about 3 to 4 hours so they can solidify. Now I'm getting some shortening in this little cavity here. I will link that mold in the description, and I want to press this down. I'm dipping my hand in some cornstarch so I can flatten it out, and then I want to wipe some shortening on the blade of this knife so the fondant doesn't stick to it, and I'm holding it flat against the counter, and I'm actually pushing down with the knife so that the orange fondant stays into that cavity, and then I lift that up and press it down. And then I want to get this out of here, so I'm flipping it over and I'm using a needle tool and I'm carefully peeling the mold back so I don't break the piece. This fondant is still a little soft, so I want to get it back into the right position. And I made another one of these as well. And now I want to make these little under the sea decorations. So I'm rolling purple fondant and that teal fondant into little balls. And then I have these ball tools, and I'm going to use the biggest one and then the medium one as well. And I'm just pressing the ball tool in there. And I don't even know what these are, but I've made them for years. So these are just my under the sea decorations. Super simple to make. And then I'm making the little sponges and I'm rolling these into a ball, and then I'm using the tiniest ball tool to poke a bunch of holes in here. And if you have trypophobia, you're not going to like this, fear of tiny holes. Trust me, you have that fear. If you don't have it, I'll show you a picture. It's a nightmare. But anyway, I'm just making the little under the sea sponges, and that looks good. Let's set those aside. Now I have this little leaf tip, and I'm cutting the tip off of that icing bag, and I'm filling this with some green American buttercream, and I'm going to use these as the under the sea seaweed. You'll see what I do with that a little later. With this, I have some Oreo cookies. The entire Oreo cookie I put in a food processor to chop it up into a fine crumb, and I'll link a food processor in the description for you. I got these shells out of the refrigerator after a few hours. Look at that beautiful variation in color. It just looks so much more realistic when you add the brown in there. So I'm removing them from the shells, and I mean the molds, and I'm getting all of my decorations and setting them aside, and then I'm going to get my cake out of the refrigerator. So I want to take a wet paper towel and wipe the board so I can clean the icing off of it. And I have some of that blue icing, and I'm going to get some of the blue icing behind the letters. That way you won't be able to really see the icing stick out. Any extra icing I'm removing with a dry paintbrush. But sometimes I like to use icing to stick decorations to icing. I feel like it gets a really good hold once it goes back in the fridge. And I start in the center letter of the name, and then I build out to the left and the right to make sure it's center. And then I'm playing my little game of, let me hold this up. I think I like this there. And then I'm going to stick that to the cake. So I really have no idea how I'm going to do this. I'm getting a toothpick underneath that next to the skewer. That way it's not going to twist when it's in the top of the cake. Get some icing underneath it and push that down on the cake. I did it a little offset to the right. I'm using a dry paintbrush just to remove any excess icing. And then again, hold that there. That looks like it'll look good. And let's get some icing behind it and stick that to the cake. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the shark yet, so I'm just going to leave him there. This turtle looks good. I'm seeing where he's touching that number, and I want to get a little bit of white icing because he's going to be touching a white, some white fondant, so I want to use white icing. So I'm going to press that against there, and then again use a dry paintbrush to remove any excess icing that you can see. And then I'm just just holding the pieces up, thinking, that looks pretty good there, and then sticking it to the cake. Now for this coral, I'm getting some piping gel behind it because it's clear and you won't be able to see it, any piping gel sticking out. And I'm putting both of those pieces down. I have to remove that fish because I wanted to put the coral there. So you see, it's no rhyme or reason. I'm like, I like that there. No, I don't. And then I move it around until I find a place that I like everything to be. And let's start putting the shells on. Usually that really big shell I like to put on the top because it's so big. And then this is how I'm making these leaves. See, I'm squeezing it and I'm doing like an up and down wave. And then I let go as I get to the top so it can form like a little point. And no rhyme or reason again, I'm just doing these randomly around the side of the cake. Now with the shark, I need a little support for him. So I'm getting a little icing behind him and sticking him to that shell so he can stand up straight. I didn't like him laying down on top of the cake, so I decided to anchor him that way. I'm getting a little bit of piping gel around the entire bottom perimeter of the cake. That way, those little cookie crumbs will stick to it. Now I like to work in small sections, so I have that tiny teaspoon and I just get some crumbs in the tip and I pour it around the entire perimeter of the cake. And then again, getting some piping gel underneath these little decorations and sticking them down. And I forgot to mention, after I made the edible images, I let them sit overnight so they dried flat and were able to hold their shape. That's how that shark is standing up on its own. And then finally, I want to wrap the ribbon around the cake, so I'm pressing the glue stick against the side of the cake to flatten out the foil, and then getting some glue on the board and on the back of the ribbon, and then wrapping that around. And get some glue down where it overlaps and press that down. And here is the cake. How adorable. So there you go. How cute is this under the sea cake? And it is a little easy-ish with the use of the edible images. Now I have videos where I go into detail on how I use edible images, and that will be linked in the description. But I get all of my edible printing supplies from Icing Images. I've been shopping there for years. I became affiliated with them a little over a year ago. So I do have an affiliate link that I will put in the description for you. But I've been shopping there forever just because they have the best quality products. It is very important when you are using edible printer supplies that they are high quality, because if you get the cheap icing sheets, they're going to fall apart as you peel them from that backing. The color might not be as vibrant, and it's just worth the investment to get a high quality product. Now this cake is a 2-layer torted 6-inch cake, and it feeds about 12 to 16. And I have a video where I talk about when to tort and when not to tort your cakes, and I give a chart with the serving sizes, and I'm going to link that in the description. And how much did I charge for this cake? This one was $275. So I think that's it. What new techniques did you learn in this video? You learned? Why did I say it like that? I would love to know. Leave them in the comments below. And I'm so excited to announce my KakeAcademy membership program. There are 3 tiers to my membership. The base tier is a cake pop tier, which you can support me monthly and help me make more content for you. And you also get free and discounted extras. Extras are things like PDFs and recipe books that I release. And then the top 2 tiers, the cupcake tier and the dessert table tier, both have access to my exclusive Facebook group where we are having so much fun in there. And I know I keep saying this, but I just love this community that I'm building. And this is a place where you can get advice on your cakes. You can get pricing advice, design advice if you want constructive criticism. And I'm also going live in that Facebook group where I'm teaching classes. I just did one on marshmallow fondant, and next week I'll be doing one on how to ice your cake really smooth with buttercream icing. So I would love to have you in the program. I'm going to link the membership in the description below. Please like this video if you liked it, and if you're enjoying my tutorials, I would be so grateful if you could buy me a coffee. My link is in the description. And please keep in touch on socials, and you can check out my website. And if you want to stick around, you can watch this video next and hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. And remember, it's cake, have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.